22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses said to the people, "Now, Israel, hear the statutes and decrees which I am teaching you to observe, that you may live, and may enter in and take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. In your observance of the commandments of the Lord your God, which I enjoin upon you, you shall not add to what I command you, nor subtract from it. Observe them carefully, for thus will you give evidence of your wisdom and intelligence to the nations, who will hear of all these statutes and say, 'This great nation is truly a wise and intelligent people.' For what great nation is there that has gods so close to it as the Lord, our God, is to us whenever we call upon him? Or what great nation has statutes and decrees that are as just as this whole law which I am setting before you today?" The word of the Lord.
One who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. The one who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. Whoever walks blamelessly and does justice, who thinks the truth in his heart, and slanders not with his tongue. The one who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. Who harms not his fellow man, nor takes up a reproach against his neighbor, by whom the reprobate is despised, while he honors those who fear the Lord. The one who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. Who lends not his money at usury, and accepts no bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things shall never be disturbed. The one who does justice will live in the presence of the
A reading from the letter of St. James. Dearest brothers and sisters, all good giving and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no alteration or shadow caused by change. He willed to give us birth by the word of truth, that we may be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Humbly welcome the word that has been planted in you and is able to save your souls. Be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deluding yourselves. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When the Pharisees with some scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees, and in fact all Jews, do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of the elders. And on coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things that they have traditionally observed: the purification of cups and jugs and kettles and beds. So the Pharisees and scribes questioned him. "Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands?" He responded, "Well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites. As it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts.' You disregard God's commandment, but cling to human tradition." He summoned the crowd again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defile. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within, and they defile." The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from Deuteronomy 4, 1-2 and 6-8. In this reading, Moses praises the law and the statutes that God has given to the people of Israel. It is difficult to understand at times why Moses and the book of Deuteronomy see the law as so positive, especially when we read the letters of Paul. Paul condemns the law and those who follow the law. But we have to realize that in the ancient world, the gods were considered capricious. They could punish you for anything that occurred, even if you didn't know you were doing it. They drew this conclusion because life is often beset by disasters from unknown sources. Appendicitis, the flu, a flood, a tornado. Why are these things happening? And remember, in the ancient world, causality was not separated from the will of God. They believed that everything that happened was a direct message from God. So if a disaster happened, it had to be for a reason, and most likely it was a punishment because of some offense that one had committed, again, even if one didn't know that one was doing the wrong thing. The law of Israel was a gift from God because it told the people of Israel exactly what they were to do. It gave them a safe path that they could walk in, and in which they could be favored by the Lord. And therefore they saw the law not as an imposition, not as something external, but as a special gift from God. The second reading is from the letter of James, chapter 1, verses 17-18, 21b-22, and 27. In these verses, we hear James praise the fact that God has given us the gift, the Word of God, that's been planted in our hearts. We have to live that Word, though, not simply hearing it, but actualizing it in life. And especially in the letter of James, what is emphasized is the idea that our faith has to be an active faith in which we serve those who are poor. The poor are in the world so that we will serve them. We have been given greater gifts so that we would share them with those who don't have them. The Gospel is from Mark 7, 1-8, 14-15, and 21-23. The Pharisees and the observant Jews are upset that the disciples of Jesus eat without washing their hands. They always wash their hands scrupulously. Now, the law of Israel doesn't exactly say that you have to do that before you eat a meal. What it says is that you have to wash your hands before you pray. But the Pharisees always tried to take the law to its widest possible interpretation. They built a fence around the law to make sure they weren't breaking the smallest part of the law. Therefore, if you had to wash your hands before you prayed, eating in some ways could be compared to worshiping God, thanking God for the gifts He had given. So they feel that they should also wash their hands before they eat. What does Jesus say? These are the traditions of the elders. From the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, 444 BC, there was a constant chain of rabbis who would interpret the law for Israel. In the days of Jesus, Hillel and Shammai were the famous rabbis who interpreted the law, and their interpretations were considered normative. They had the power to loose and to bind. They had the authority that was given to Peter when he said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." What does Jesus say about that? You're hypocrites. You perform the external deeds, but you don't really wash what most needs washing, your hearts. You have to purify your hearts because it's from within that the greatest and most devious sins come: unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, etc. So Jesus reminds us that the law was given to us not to be exact prescriptions that have to be followed as if one were in servitude, but rather as a guide that leads our heart to greater conversion, so that we might follow not only the letter of the law, but especially the spirit of the law. And may God bless us.